Hope and redemption come in the act of serving others. Eleanor Roosevelt once noted, "Do not hesitate to do what you think you cannot do. Dare to reach beyond your perceived limits. Do not let yourself be trapped within the narrow confines of narrow thinking. Do not let past defeats and failures drag you down." Yom Kippur is the ultimate day of Jewish optimism in our ability to grow, change, and redefine ourselves. It is a day to cleanse ourselves of our past failings and sins and to imagine ourselves beginning a new phase in our lives. Yom Kippur aims at our spiritual selves. It calls for a transformation in the way we see things and the way we experience things. It wants us to confront reality more clearly than we have done in the past. Young or old, this is a time for renewal and reinvigoration, hope and redemption. The Haftarah for this morning of Yom Kippur is drawn from Isaiah, where the prophet reminds the Israelites that God wants purity of behavior, compassion to the poor and downtrodden. God rejects outward shows of piety and insists on genuine righteousness. God chastises those who bend their heads like a bulrush and spread a couch of sackcloth and ashes, when in fact they conduct their lives immorally. Will you call this a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this the fast that I choose, to loosen the fetters of wickedness, to undo the bonds of the yoke, sending the oppressed free and breaking every yoke? Is it not to break your bread for the hungry and that you bring into your house the outcast poor? Hope and redemption come in the act of serving others. If Yom Kippur is observed without our realizing the deeper significance of the moment, then it is just another lost opportunity. It is said of the great 16th century sage, Rabbi Isaac Luria, that he would not recite his afternoon prayers until he first paid his workmen for their day's labor. He reasoned, "How can I appear before God if I do not meet my moral obligation to pay my workers on time? It is hypocritical to mouth pious words to God while at the same time being guilty of improper behavior and slander towards one's fellow." Yom Kippur offers us purification, a fresh start, a revived spirit. It reminds us of who we are and who we can yet become. It dares us to transcend our past limits. If we experience Yom Kippur deeply and clearly, we will face the adventure of life with renewed strength and wisdom. The Mishnah says that Yom Kippur is one of two of the happiest days on the Jewish calendar. This day offers us a unique gift, the gift of personal renewal. Hope and redemption come in the act of serving others. In the book of Exodus, God's message to the children of Israel and to us is, "Atem tihiu li mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh Ela hadvarim asher tidaber el bnei Yisrael, and you shall be to me a kingdom of ministers and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the children of Israel." The meaning of the word kohanim, translated here as ministers, are those who serve others and through that service lead others toward an understanding and acceptance of God's mission. The verse calls on us to be a community that serves others. Service to others and to the community is a foundation of our own growth. But that growth occurs only in as much as we focus on the service of others and not on our own greatness, legacy, or accomplishments. In Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s 1963 I Have a Dream speech, he described a faith by which we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. I understand Dr. King as describing an alchemic spiritual process in which by practicing love, expansiveness, we direct the energy of the Yetzer Hara, generated by fear and constriction into the Yetzer HaTov, from evil to good, towards holy ends. Hope and redemption do come in the act of serving others. Several years later, King described a spiritual process. When our days become dreary with low hovering clouds of despair, and when our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, let us remember that there is a creative force in this universe working to pull down the gigantic mountains of evil, a power that is able to make a way out of no way and transform dark yesterdays into bright tomorrows. Let us realize the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. The arc of justice does not bend of its own will. Several years ago, I was asked by the Cook County Public Defender, Amy Campanelli, to serve on an interfaith advisory committee for her office. This came about because we, as represented by our Social Justice Committee, invited Amy Campanelli to be a part of a panel discussion on criminal justice reform. One of the issues she brought up was the need to eliminate cash bond. I was honored and a bit overwhelmed to be asked. But after our first meeting, I felt empowered. As a group, we set up a system by which we could monitor bond court and help those arrested for nonviolent offenses. Their only choice might be plead guilty to the charge and have a felony charge on their record, a conviction, and get to go home, or stay in jail, missing out on school, work, and family because they could not come up with the cash bond. The idea was that after meeting with them before their appearance and then sharing with the court that the community of faith was involved, we could provide real help for these nonviolent offenders. It was my turn. Though the court proceedings sped by and were very hard for me to follow, and the judge rarely looked up from the papers in front of him. At the end of the day, Amy Campanelli shared with me how amazed she was by the large number of nonviolent offenders who were released on electronic monitors or their own recognizance. My standing up in court helped to bend the arc just a little bit. Though I would not have thought about it this way back then, today we call this practicing anti-racism. Hope and redemption come in the act of serving others. The arc of justice does not bend of its own will. This does not happen naturally. It happens because we make it happen when we heed the words of Isaiah, who admonishes us in no uncertain terms. The most profound religious and spiritual acts that we can perform are not to be found in ritual and not to be found in words of prayer or even meditation. No. The most profound religious acts are acts of justice, feeding the hungry, sheltering the homeless, clothing naked, freeing the captive, pursuing justice actively. This is where hope and redemption dwell. Hope and redemption for ourselves, for the world we reside in, is in our hands. We create a better future. We can bring hope into a world that at the moment seems hopeless. We can bring redemption in a world that fully embodies the vision of our prophets. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation. Each person shall dwell under their own vine and fig tree without anyone to make them afraid. Yom Kippur is a day of rejoicing, for we can bring hope and redemption into the world with gimilut chasadim, acts of justice and love that truly bend the arc.